Good morning. How can God take the worst thing in my life and make it the best thing in my life? Joseph was 17 years old. You know, Joseph, we all read the little Bible stories. Joseph and his coat of many colors. And we see that and we know the story. But he was 17 years old. Now you think about your children at 17 or yourself at 17, put in a ditch, sold to a strange place, and in prison all those years, falsely accused, then put into the king's prison because Potiphar was high up in the echelon of government. And so he was in the worst prison he could be in. And he was in that prison for years and years and years. And yet, at 30 years old, he was sprung because of a dream interpretation. And here he is now prime minister of all of Egypt, at that time, the greatest and strongest civilization in the world. And he is the highest ranking person. Then his brothers show up. You know the story. And he puts the cup in Benjamin's sack and because he was the youngest. And he wanted to see if they had grown or they had changed. And they're willing to sacrifice their brother, but they were not. And he came in and they were crying. And once they discovered who he really was, and they thought everything was going to be okay. But after the father died, they were still afraid that he would take revenge on them. You know what Joseph said? He said right here in chapter 50, as we look in verse 20, he said, but as for you, you meant it for evil against me, but God meant it for good. God meant it for good. Now listen, in order to bring about as this day to save many people alive. Now, COVID, all those bad things, lost your job, you don't know what the future is going to be, don't have a lot of money, all of those things. Wouldn't it be incredible if God could take this worst thing and turn it into the best thing that ever happened to you? I remember William Carey made such an impact on me early in the ministry. He was a missionary around, say, 1800, and he was a cobbler. He was a pot and pan guy, salesman type guy. He repaired pots and pans. God called him to the mission field. He went to the mission field in India, spent his entire life there. And he'd interpreted so many dialects of the Indian language that it was incredible. All that he had this printing press that was fantastic. It was magnificent. And he felt like his life's work was coming together. And it was so rewarding to him. And he thought, we finally made it. Well, one night, guess what happened? The printing press burned to the ground. Back then, they didn't have any discs to save it on. He lost everything. His life's work was over. He said, I sat there with all the ashes and the black on my face with tear streams that were running down, and I literally thought it was the end of my life. Well, guess what? Somebody found out about it. It got written up in the London Times near the back of the paper. And then it made it a little closer to the front. Finally, it made it to the front page. So much money came in to William Carey's ministry that he had to tell the London Times, stop advertising this, stop talking about it. We cannot even use all the money that we have. At the end of his life, you know what he said? What I thought was the worst thing in my life turned out to be the best thing in my life. Now, God can do that for you. He can do that for me. What we think is the worst thing, God can turn to the best thing. That's his power. His power to take bad and make it good. You think your situation with your health is the worst thing that could ever happen. God can turn it into something good. Your marital situation, worst thing, God can turn it into something good. Something with one of your children, God can turn it into something good. Something with you trying to get into the career world or all that's happened to you with this COVID thing, God can turn it into something good. In fact, he can make it so great that you could say at the end of your life, just like William Carey, what I thought was the worst thing has turned out to be the best thing. That's because of the power of God. God bless you today as you take this with you.